Hey everybody, today we're going to be looking at customizing the Book a Room application template in Power Apps. So if you're an organization that's trying to figure out how to get back to work and use your space effectively, this one could be a good one for you. Hey everybody, welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. We've got a doozy of a demo for you today. We've been playing around with application templates in Power Apps, and you may have seen some of those videos in the past, but today we were kind of playing with one of those templates and we thought, hey, here's a real world scenario that everybody's dealing with today and getting back to work. And what if we could take one of those templates and show you how to add some customization to it to actually fit that real world use case of either dealing with shared workspaces or more efficiently utilizing the physical workspace that we have as we're all coming back to work. So hold on tight, this one's gonna be a bit long. So one of the important things to note about Power Apps in particular is the large amount of application templates that exist out there that the Microsoft and Microsoft 365 community have provided and are available to you. These can be either Canvas or model-driven apps. You may find use cases in these app templates that are directly applicable to your business or your use cases. You may use these application templates as something that inspires you to create an application, to suit your needs, or these can be simply a great place to start from an application template so that you can then extend or enhance the use case that's there to meet your needs. So let's jump right into a application template demo. So first we'll kind of take a look through the template gallery that we have available to us. And so we'll do that by going to view all templates. And again, you'll see that there are a number of templates here, both Canvas apps and model-driven apps. In this particular case, we want to demo this Book a Room application. So the idea or the basic idea or use case of this application is it provides a simple way, an application that allows users to book a room in your organization based on a meeting in their calendar or availability of those rooms. And so we'll quickly give this application a name. And we're given the option here between tablet or phone format. So just remember that in your particular use case, when you're creating a Canvas app, you can have it basically pre-built, targeted for mobile device or for a tablet or desktop. And so we'll go ahead and create that application. And so as simple as that, you can basically build an application that actually is useful and functional for you from one of those templates. So while we're waiting for this to come up, we'll talk a little bit about what this is going to allow us to do. So this is going to connect to both Outlook as well as users in Office 365 or the Microsoft 365 environment. So we're going to say allow that. And as soon as this fires up, we'll be able to demonstrate what this looks like. So here we are in the dev environment. We have the ability, we can actually push play here and actually run this application. So this is what an end user would see. And this thing is already wired up in my tenant. It's connected to my Exchange where my rooms are. It's also connected to my Outlook, so it understands meetings that I may have. We have the option here to book for an existing meeting or to book without a meeting. So let's say I don't have a meeting booked yet, but I know I need one. I just talked to somebody. We said, let's get a room and have that discussion, right? So we'll go ahead and book without a meeting. What this is going to do is this is going to go out and grab all of the rooms that are available based on the current date and time. So today at 2:30 p.m. These rooms have availability. And so we can simply go through this list, and if there's one that we want to book, let's say I know I'm in the North End Service Center and I want to book the conference room, I can click book here, and this will actually finish the job of booking that room for that time period. So we were able to successfully book it. If we want to book another room, we can go back and do that, or we can be done. And just as simple as that, you can stand up an application that gives users the ability to actually book a room in your organization. So one of the things is I was playing with this, and I was thinking about kind of the next demo that we want to do, is I started to think of some common scenarios in the workspace today, or in the workplace today. And right now, as we think about everybody coming back to work and all of the people who are doing remote work, are we effectively using our physical space, our facilities? I started to think about the questions that an organization might ask. So how do we improve productivity for remote teams? How do we transform how we use our physical access? How do we set up scenarios that allow our users to share workspaces more effectively. And so those are some of the questions that kind of popped into my mind when I was thinking about this Book a Room app. And so then I thought to myself, what if we could take this application, and instead of just simply allowing them to book rooms, what if we had shared workspaces in there and we could use this for kind of like a hoteling type scenario where users could not just see the rooms that were available, but could also see maybe some additional metadata about the rooms, filter and sort the rooms based on their requirements for their meeting or for the day that they're going to show up to work at the facility. And so could we actually facilitate that more effective use of the physical space as we're all coming back to work? And so I took some time and I extended this template that we just put together. And so I'm going to quick open up the one that I created. So we're going to leave this one behind. And I'm going to jump back over here to my applications. And I have this Book a Room PA demo here that I have. And so we're going to jump right into this and take a look and see some of the extensions that I've already made with some metadata. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we've done to this. This is basically that same application template that I started with. I extended this by adding some metadata, things like room capacity, the location of the room, and of actual physical address, whether or not the room had any amenities, things like that, the type of room it was, is it a workspace or a conference room? And so let's take a look at this same application with that additional metadata in action. So again, we'll book a room without a meeting since I don't have a meeting at the moment. And right away, you'll see some differences on this screen. It loaded up with all of those same rooms, but we've got an indicator on each of the cards telling us whether or not it's a conference room or a workspace. We've also got the size of the room or the capacity included. And then we've got the ability here at the top to filter this. So let's say I need a room, that will accommodate at least 9 people, and I care about workspaces, right? I can quickly narrow that down. And so pretty quickly you can see how you can extend that Book a Room use case for your scenario. There may be other properties or metadata that you care about tracking or that your users care about that you could use for this. But this is an example of what I put together, and that was pretty easy to customize this template to facilitate that. But what if we wanted to do more? What if not only could the user filter these things based on the type of workspace and the capacity, but what if they could actually see these rooms on a map? So let's say it's a scenario where you have distributed offices in a particular region or area of the country, and the user needs to use a shared workspace for a half a day on a Monday, and they want to know what facility is closest to them. What's the best one to access based on their proximity, right? So I started to think about that, and I thought, well, could we add some mapping functionality to this application? And what we want to do right now is we actually want to kind of step through what it will take to add that mapping functionality to this application. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add a map screen. So here on the left-hand side, we have all of our existing screens. We're simply going to add a new screen to this. We're going to start with a blank screen. We're going to name this our map screen. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to do. The next thing we need to do is figure out how to get to this screen from where we just were. So we're going to jump back to that room select screen. And I think if I wanted to show these rooms on a map, I think we'll plop a button right in this area. So we're going to go over to our insert menu. We'll find our button. And we'll drag this button over here, make it a little bit bigger. Want it to be fairly prominent. And the next thing we want to do is we want to add some text to this button. So we want to say show on a map. And let's say we want to make this thing a little bit more interesting to look at. Well, make sure I choose the right property here. So where is my... So one of the things to note about Power Apps is if you're finding it hard to find one of those properties, you can simply come and find that property here to make that a little bit easier. And so in this particular case, we're going to go with, let's see, we'll go with a dark orange. Nice and bright, so our user's like, hey, I can map these things, right? So now the next thing we need to do is we need to basically make this button actually do something for us. So we've selected that button, and in the on select, so that's basically like on click when the user clicks the button, we're simply going to go in here and we're going to say we want to navigate, and we're going to go to our map screen. All right, so let's test that out, shall we? So I'm holding down the Alt key so that I can test this while I'm kind of in dev mode, and sure enough, I click that button and it goes to our map screen. All right, so the next thing we want to do here is we're going to actually add a map to our screen. So in our map screen, if we look at our menu of options to insert, again, just like everything else, if you're like, oh, I don't know where I can find a map here, I happen to know it's under media. But if we search for map, we can find it just as quickly. And we'll click that, and this will add a map to our screen. And we want this map to take up the entire screen, so we're just going to go ahead and drag that. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually create some data for this map. So those rooms that we have back on this room select screen, whatever rooms are here, we want to show up when the user actually goes to this map screen. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to actually create this data when this map screen becomes visible. So in the map screen, we're going to go to our onVisible event. And in this particular case, we can expand our formula bar, and we can start to make that data. So in this case, we're going to create a collection of those things. And that collection is going to be called mapped rooms. So remember that, we're going to use that later. And we're going to be getting columns from an existing collection that we already have. And that collection is called available room email name meta. So it's the one that has the metadata on it that I pre-built for this demo. And the data elements that we care about are things like amenities. So we're going to give our column names here, and then the column that it's actually coming from. The next one we want is capacity. So again, this is coming from our room meta record, which is actually on the available rooms email name meta collection. Let's also add things like the street, get our address. And so you can see that IntelliSense is something that works really well in this case. So I know what these columns are generally speaking, but if you forget, you can just start typing and it will help you figure some of that stuff out. State. Let's see, the next one we want is going to be our zip code. So in this case, I know it's called postal code. Our site, so this is going to be the name of the given location. The next one we care about is our site type. So this is the thing that distinguishes whether or not it's a conference room or a workspace. So site type. And in this particular case, I know it's a lookup field, so we're going to actually get the value for that. It's more than just a text field in that scenario. The full address. So this one's important because this is the field that we're actually going to use to plot these points on our map. So that one's very important. We could assemble all of those things from the city, street, address, all of that kind of stuff. But in this particular case, it's a little bit easier since I have it pre-built. So that particular case is called disp name. And then in this case, we also want to kind of color code our items based on the colors of the little indicators that we're using in our gallery of available rooms. And so in this case, we're going to provide an item color that'll make things a little bit easier for us to color code things on our map. So in this particular case, we're going to set that color based on whether or not it's a conference room or a workspace. So we're going to implement a little logic here. So we've got our if statement, and what we care about is room meta.room type .value, and if that value is equal to workspace, then we're going to do a little bit of color magic. And let's see, 50, 225, 50. And if it's not workspace, then we're going to do a different color. And so just for those folks out there that didn't know, I had these colors predefined when I built the app, and I just know what they are. One more parentheses there, and we should be good. Okay, so now, whenever this screen becomes visible, this mapped rooms collection will be basically cleared and then populated from our available room email name meta collection. Okay, so now that we've actually created our map data, we need to figure out how to get this information onto our map. So we're going to set some of the properties of our map in this case. First, I'm going to rename this so that it's a little bit more meaningful. We're going to call it our room map. And for this map, we want to go, we'll get rid of our property search here and look at all of the properties that we have here. And so some of the things that we want to set on this particular map are going to be the items collection. So we're going to point that directly to our actual, so here's our location items. We're going to point that to our new collection that we just created, so mapped rooms. And then we want to talk about some fields that we want to include in the map display when the user is looking at those things. So we're going to add those here. So in this particular case, we want capacity. We also might want something like the site name. We also might want the amenities. And then the full address might be also useful. So we've added those, so those will be available on the map. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to do a few extra little things. So we want to show hover cards on this map. So when the user hovers over a particular point, we're going to, when they hover over it, we're going to show them that information, so those fields that we just chose. We also want to set the map's current location. So if you're using location services, so if you're on a mobile device or something like that, you can utilize the location service on that mobile device to pinpoint the current location. In this particular scenario for the demo, I don't have that ability, so I'm going to go ahead and preset the default location as well as the current location. All right, so our default latitude and longitude, our latitude is going to be 42 and change. Our longitude is going to be negative 83 and change. Set our default zoom level to 10, so we're not quite as zoomed in so much. We're going to set our current location, and we want to show that current location, so that's going to be the dot that is me on the map. And again, we're going to center that on our default location because we want to be the center of the world, right? All right, so once I've got those things in place, and we'll turn our default location on as well. You'll see that this has us somewhere in the kind of Detroit metro area, and there's our current location. And it just so happens that the organization in question that we're dealing with today for the demo, all of its rooms or its facilities are in the Detroit metro area as well. And so now it's time to actually plot those things on the map. And so what we need to do is we need to actually connect the address column or field from our mapped rooms collection to the appropriate field on this map. And so if you look through in our advanced properties, we'll see we have our items defined there. It's pretty obvious here. We have an item addresses property, and so this is what we want to feed our full address. And so we're going to give it our mapped rooms dot full address. And you can see IntelliSense kind of helped us out there quite a bit. We have our item colors, and so we can actually use that item color field that we created. And then the last thing that we want to do is add a label to each of these things, and this is going to be the actual site name. So our site, and so then that should actually plot those things on a map. So now what we want to do is we want to step back out to our other screen and come back in here so that we populate that collection and actually see if those things show up on our map. And in thinking about getting back to that screen, why don't we go ahead and add a back button while we're here. In this case, I'll do it with an icon. So I should have an icon to choose from here. We'll make that thing nice and big. And we are going to change it. Let's say we want something that represents going back, right? So there's a back button. That looks pretty good. And I think we ought to make this really pop. So we're going to turn it green. And so then the thing we need to do there is we need to, again, set the navigation for this particular button when the user clicks it. And we're simply going to take them back to the room select screen. All right, so now we can actually test this out. So we'll flip over to run mode, and if I click this button, sure enough, it takes me back to this screen. Now let's use our show on a map button to take us back to the map and see if it'll actually load up some points for us. And what do you know? We've got a number of points on our map. We can actually hover over those elements now and see additional information about them. So whether or not what the location is, what the site name is, what the capacity is. We can zoom in on this map. So in this particular case, we have 6 locations really packed together here. 5 of them are in a single facility, and there's another facility just down the street that's a conference room. But you can really quickly kind of see how a user can plot these points on a map and take advantage of their location technology on their phone or other device to help them book a room. Okay, so now that we have our points plotted on our map, you might say, well, that's all well and good. The user can see them and see what they are, but how do they actually book them from the map? And so that's the next piece we'll work on. We could do this pretty easily from letting them click a particular item and book it. But in the scenario where you have multiple workspaces or conference rooms in a single facility, you might want them to be able to narrow that down a little bit better since these are all kind of clustered together. So what we'll do to enable that is we're going to actually add an additional component to this screen. We're going to add a gallery. And we're going to add that over here on the right-hand side. So let's go find a vertical gallery. And so here it is right here. It's floating around on top of our map. You can see it. We're going to do some things to it to make it a little bit more appealing for the end user before we add data to it because it helps to be able to read when you're looking at something like this. So we're going to size it right there. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of set the fill for this thing. So we'll jump back over here because it's easy to find the fill property this way. And here are the 2 properties that I care about. So one is just the overall, the baseline fill, if you will. So in this case, we want it to be a fairly white fill. So we're going to go 255, 255, and then we'll give it like we'll do a 90% transparent. And then in our template fill, so the template fill is the fill of the individual cards in this. In this case, we're going to choose kind of a bluish color. And so we're going to go with 50, 133, 133, and 20% transparency. So now this is pretty prominent on the map, so the user can see this. It's not as hard to read when we have data in there, and it's pretty prominent. So then the next thing we want to do is we're going to choose the type of gallery we want. So if we jump back out to our main properties for our gallery, you've got some items to choose from out of the box. In this case, most of the content that we're going to be showing is going to be text-based and maybe a button to allow you to book it. So we're going to do title, subtitle, and body. And so that's kind of what those cards will look like. And now we are ready to specify some data for this. So the way that we want to do this is we want to define the data for this gallery when a user clicks on one of these points on our map. So we're going to go back to our map itself, and we're going to go find our onSelect property. And right now there's nothing going on in the onSelect, but we're actually going to make something happen here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to basically get us another collection for our data. But we want to do this based on whether or not the user has actually selected something. So clicking on the map just in any old place doesn't matter. It matters if they've actually selected one of our points on the map. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out if there are any rows that they've selected. So we're going to look at our room map, selected items, and if that count is greater than 0, then we're going to create a collection. So here's our collection. We're going to do selected rooms. And we're going to get that from the room map selected items. So that's pretty straightforward. And then we're going to do another thing here. So thinking in advance, that gallery that we just created, I really don't want it to be on the map unless the user has actually selected something. So we're going to set a variable that will allow us to show and hide that gallery based on whether or not the user has selected something. So the way we're going to do that here is we're going to set a variable called selected rooms gallery visible. And so in this case, they've actually selected something. There's more than 0, so we're going to set it to true. And then we need to define what we're going to do in the alternative case. And in that scenario, we're going to clear our collection. So that same collection that we just populated, in this case, if the user clicks off of that selected item, we want to actually empty that collection out and then hide our gallery because no longer is anything selected. So again, we'll set our variable. All right, so now we've got that in place. So what this means is that whenever the user selects something, it's going to populate that particular collection with some data. So the next thing we need to do, or the thing we're ready to do, is we can actually go over to our gallery and select our gallery, and we can actually pick the data source. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and click one of these particular things on the map, so that will trigger that thing to fire, which will populate that collection. And now when I go to my data source for this gallery, we should see a selected rooms option. And so you can see it's already got some of the data there. It's from that one that I just selected. Okay, so now that I have my selected rooms gallery connected to some actual data, we can come in here and map this to the fields that we would actually like to display for the user. So in this case, I want my title to be the site name. My subtitle, let's do capacity. So how many people are in the room, or can the room hold? And then for our body, we'll actually do amenities, because that might be something that's a list of items in our amenities. And then in this case, I want this, like this number is kind of like useless if I don't know what it really is. So the important thing to note is you can come in here and further customize the text on these individual cards or elements. So we're going to go to the text for this particular element. And so in addition to showing the capacity, we're simply going to add size like that. And so now the user can actually tell what it is. Okay, so then the next thing we want to do is we want to kind of go back and make sure that we're utilizing that visible property that we set. So we're going to go select the gallery itself, and this should have a visible property available for us. And we're simply going to set this to that variable that we set. Selected rooms gallery visible. And so now it's didn't know what to do, and now it knows it should be visible. And so we've set that. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to also make sure that we set it to not be visible whenever this screen first shows up for the user. So we're going to go back to our map screen, and when the map screen becomes visible, we're going to add some logic here right after we set up our data. And we're simply going to say set our visible variable to false. And so that basically means when this screen loads up, that gallery will be hidden initially until the user actually selects something, in which case we set it to visible. The next thing I would like to do here is I want to add an additional indicator to this, telling the user what type of workspace it is. So while I'm in this card editing it, we're going to go over here and we're going to add, in this case, I'll just grab a button, and we're going to put that somewhere on our card, and we're going to make it really small, and we're going to set the text for this guy. So let's look for our text property. And so rather than saying button, in this case, we want to say if this item dot room meta room type dot value equals workspace, then we're going to say WS for short. Otherwise, it must be a conference room, in which case we'll use CR for short. All right, so we can see that that changed right away. And then the last thing I want to do is make this a little bit more congruent with our color scheme, and also make it a little bit prettier from a button standpoint. So let's go look for our radius, and we're going to add some additional radius. So we're going to set all of those to 15. So just one of those nice little creature features, nice touch. And then we care about the fill color. And so in this case, we can get away with using our item color that we specified. So this item dot item color should show up. And so there we can see that our workspaces are green. And now if we actually play this and we select our different locations, we can see the different types of workspaces that show up, indicating to the user, what it is, and giving them all the information they need to know. That's the room for me. So then the very last thing we need to do is we need to allow the user to actually book these rooms. So it's one thing to show them these in a list. It's another thing entirely to actually facilitate the booking. So to do that, we're going to actually take advantage of this icon that's already injected into this template card. So right now this is simply doing a select parent. But what we want to do is we want to do a little bit additional work to actually book the room. And so we're going to do that through setting some variables. So this application is using some variables to identify which room is being booked. And so in this case, we care about the selected room email. And we're going to get that from the selected rooms gallery dot selected email. And that just reminded me, I forgot to name my gallery. So that's one of the things to remember. If you add these things and you forget, sometimes they'll just get called gallery 1, gallery 2, gallery 3. In this case, we'll go back and give it a meaningful name. Okay, so now when we go back and look at the onSelect for this, that should actually work. The next thing we want to do is set the room name for the selected room from the same selected item on the gallery. And we're going to set a little variable that tells the application that we're booking something. And then we're going to navigate to the confirmation screen. Okay, so that should be all we need to do. So now let's actually see how well this works for us. So we'll go ahead and start back at the beginning. And so here's our rooms that we want to show on a map. Maybe there's more rooms available to us. So we'll grab more rooms. Looks like I've got a total of 23 rooms. So let's show all of those rooms on a map. So we see our map is loading up. There's our list of rooms. Let's say these 6 are closest to my proximity, my current location. So I'm going to select those. I'm going to look through this list and I'm going to say, I need that room that's just has 4 people. So I'm going to click this and it has booked that room for me. So just that simple, we basically added some mapping functionality that would allow the user on a tablet or their mobile device to look at the rooms that are available in relation to their proximity and then go ahead with booking it. Thanks guys for sticking with us. That was a long one. but hopefully it was beneficial and you can get some value out of that for your organization. If you like this content, feel free to like or subscribe, and we're always interested to hear what you're doing to save time in your world, in your modern workplace. So feel free to post comments and let us know what's going on in your world.